Mist drifted low among the oaks, a pale veil stirred by the sigh of early morning wind. Dew clung to every leaf and blade of grass, beating Clara Whitmore's shawl until it glistened like a net of pearls. She stepped carefully through the damp hush, boots sinking into spongy moss, her basket swinging against her hip. The forest smelled of wet bark and crushed fern, a fragrance that steadied her pulse as surely as prayer. It had been a month since Samuel's passing, yet his absence still pressed against her ribs, an ache that deepened with each empty dawn. She had come for the wild herbs her mother once gathered for fevers and aches, but also for the silence, the unbroken listening of the woods. A crow gave a single harsh call and went quiet. Clara paused. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere to her left, a branch snapped, clean, deliberate, not the careless break of a squirrel. She felt it more than heard it, the shift of presence. Her heart thudded once, then steadied, as if some larger rhythm had claimed it. She turned. Between the trunks, half wreathed in fog, stood a creature of impossible stature. Dark fur gleamed with the sheen of rain. Shoulders broad as a carriage door lifted and settled with slow, deliberate breaths. A silverback gorilla, she had read of such beasts in the travel journals Samuel collected, but to see one here, in these familiar woods, was like meeting a dream that had stepped through a crack in the world. The animal did not charge. It did not flinch. It simply regarded her, eyes deep-set and copper-flecked, old as river stones. A scar split the left side of its chest in a pale crescent, a memory of some past violence, yet the gaze it fixed on her held no threat. Only watchfulness. Only quiet. Clara's first impulse was to back away, but the forest behind her seemed to close like a door. Instead she drew a slow breath, the way she had when Samuel's illness worsened and panic had threatened to undo her. She set the basket down with deliberate care. The small thump of wood on earth echoed louder than expected. She kept her hands visible, palms open. The gorilla tilted its head. A mirror of her own movement, subtle and strange. Its breath misted in the cold air, a soft cloud rising and fading. Time stretched thin. She could hear the delicate patter of water dripping from leaves, the far-off call of a lone thrush, and beneath it all the deep, steady rhythm of the creature's breathing. It felt less like facing a wild animal and more like standing before an ancient intelligence that weighed her sorrow and found it familiar. She lowered herself to a crouch, slow enough that her knees cracked audibly. The gorilla's dark eyes followed every inch of her descent. Her shawl slipped from one shoulder and she let it fall, a quiet surrender. She remembered the herbalist's lore, never run, never bare your teeth. But what she felt was not fear. It was something stranger, a recognition, as if this being understood what it was to lose and to keep moving anyway. A breeze swirled the mist between them, carrying the scent of wet earth and crushed pine. Clara held the gaze, refusing the instinct to look away. In those unblinking eyes she saw a calm that matched the stillness she had sought since Samuel's death, a calm that asked nothing and offered no false comfort. Her chest loosened. She realized she was breathing in time with the creature. Minutes might have passed. Or a lifetime. The forest existed only as a dim halo around the small clearing they shared. When the gorilla shifted its weight, the motion was slow, almost meditative. One enormous hand rested against the trunk of an oak, fingers curling around the bark as though testing the strength of the world. Then it inclined its massive head, a gesture so deliberate it might have been a bow. Clara felt her throat tighten. Without thinking, she mimicked the movement, a slight bend at the neck, a whisper of acknowledgement. The simple act carried more gravity than any prayer she had uttered at her husband's grave. The gorilla straightened and released a low rumble, a sound that vibrated through the soil and into her bones. It was neither warning nor threat, more like a deep note of recognition. She answered without words, only the faint hum of a melody her mother used to sing, a tune as old as any forest. Her voice trembled, then steadied. The creature listened, eyes half-lidded, as if the song belonged to the same earth that held them both. A drizzle began, fine and silver. Droplets streaked the gorilla's fur, turning it to a dark mirror. Clara felt the cold seep through her dress but did not move. The distance between them seemed to shrink not by steps but by understanding. She wondered if she thought of him as he, though she had no reason, sensed the hollowness in her heart, the years she feared would stretch on without purpose. Perhaps he carried his own ghosts, scars that spoke of battle survived. The crow called again, this time farther off, and the spell shifted. The gorilla straightened to his full, breathtaking height. Muscles rolled beneath the soaked fur. For an instant she thought he would vanish into the trees. Instead he took one deliberate step closer, the earth trembling underfoot. He stopped a few paces away, close enough that she could see the rain bead on the fine hair around his eyes. They regarded each other like that, two solitary beings bound by a moment that asked for nothing but presence. No vow, no promise, only the shared knowledge that loneliness had met its reflection and found it less alone. When at last he turned, it was without haste. A slow pivot, the sweep of a massive back through the mist. He moved with the silent certainty of a river, each step absorbing the forest's hush. Clara remained kneeling, her shawl damp against the moss, until the last ripple of his passage faded and the woods exhaled again. She did not know how long she stayed there. The rain eased, the sky brightened. Somewhere in the canopy, the thrush resumed its song, a thin ribbon of music threading through the dripping leaves. Clara gathered her shawl, lifted her basket, and stood. Her knees trembled but her heart beat with a strange, quiet strength. She had come searching for herbs to soothe the body, but the forest had offered something else entirely, a meeting that would not fit into any herb jar or prayer book. As she stepped back onto the faint path home, she glanced once more into the trees. No shadow moved, no dark eyes watched. Yet she felt him near, an unseen presence etched into the morning air. The silence around her no longer felt empty. It felt alive, a living promise that in the vast, unspoken language of the world, she had been seen, and had seen in return. The forest greeted Clara each morning with a hush that felt like an embrace. Weeks had passed since the first meeting, yet every step back into those misted groves carried the same thrum of anticipation. She came with offerings now, apples wrapped in a kerchief, berries still cold with dawn. She would place them on a flat stone and wait, her breath mixing with the breath of the trees. Sometimes he arrived quickly, a dark shape gliding between oaks. Other days he lingered unseen, letting the silence stretch until her own heartbeat sounded like a drum. When he emerged, there was no rush, only the quiet assurance of presence. At first he kept his distance, a monarch cloaked in shadow, watching while she hummed the hymns her mother once sang at twilight. The notes floated through the understory, soft as falling leaves. Slowly he began to answer with a low resonance from deep in his chest, a sound that vibrated through the mossy ground and into her bones. It was not music in any human sense, but it matched her melody as though the forest itself had found a harmony for their two voices. The world beyond the woods receded. Her neighbors whispered about the widow who wondered daily, but Clara felt no need to explain. In those meetings she found a language older than words, a communion of breath and stillness. Sometimes she would sit cross-legged while he rested a few paces away, their eyes meeting across the short divide. He studied her hands as she wove small garlands of pine and fern. She studied the play of light across the silvered fur on his shoulders. Hours passed like minutes. Winter swept in with sudden ferocity. Snow thickened over the ridges, and the air turned knife-sharp. One afternoon, a squall forced her deeper into the hills. Wind howled through the trees until the path vanished beneath a blur of white. She stumbled against a fallen trunk, cold biting through her shawl. Then, from the swirling haze, he appeared, massive, solid, the embodiment of calm. Without hesitation he turned, glancing back once to be sure she followed. He led her to a cliffside hollow, a dark mouth of stone where the wind softened to a sigh. The cavern smelled of earth and pine sap. He settled near the entrance, a silent sentinel, while she huddled against the rock wall. Through the night the blizzard raged, but the hollow stayed warm, the great shape of him outlined against the dim glow of moonlit snow. Clara felt no fear, only the deep certainty that she was protected. Days later another storm struck. While gathering firewood, she heard the sudden crack of splitting timber. A heavy branch hurtled downward. She froze, heart seizing, when an immense shadow moved faster than thought. The gorilla thrust a shoulder beneath the falling trunk, muscles swelling with effort, and heaved it aside. Snow exploded in a glittering cloud. Clara staggered back, breathless, eyes wide. He regarded her briefly, a silent check for harm, before melting once more into the woods. Their bond became a rhythm of small miracles. He appeared when hunters roamed too near, his silhouette rising like a dark wall among the trees until the men retreated, spooked by something they could not name. She learned to leave subtle signs of her passage, stones arranged in a spiral, a strip of red cloth, so he would know she was safe. Nights in her cabin felt less lonely, warmed by the memory of that quiet guardianship. But human greed does not sleep. Toward the end of winter, Clara heard the distant crack of rifles. Poachers had returned, voices harsh with laughter, their dogs barking against the cold. Panic sharpened her senses. She knew they sought the rare and the powerful, the living trophies worth coin in distant markets. She also knew where he would be, following the ridge toward the deeper forest. She moved quickly, weaving through the trees until she spotted the glint of their lanterns. Heart hammering, she stepped into their path. Lost your way, gentlemen? Her voice rang clear despite the fear coiling in her stomach. Startled, the men halted. She spoke again, words tumbling fast, directions to a phantom trail, warnings of sudden storms, anything to hold their eyes. Behind her she sensed rather than saw the shadows slip away, vast and silent, swallowed by the deeper dark. One hunter narrowed his gaze. You out here alone, ma'am? Clara forced a thin smile. Been alone a long time. I know these woods better than you ever will. Something in her tone unsettled them. After a tense moment they muttered curses and turned back the way they'd come. Only when their voices faded did she sag against a tree, breath tearing through her chest. She stayed there until the forest stilled, listening for the sound she hoped to hear. None came. The next morning dawned clear and brittle. Frost glazed every branch, and the world glittered as though cut from crystal. Clara returned to the ridge where they had first met. Mist rose in pale ribbons from the earth. She waited, each heartbeat a silent plea. At last he emerged from the shadows, a living monolith edged in silver light. He paused a few yards away, his breath rising in slow clouds. Their eyes met across the frosted clearing, and time bent once more. No words, no gesture, only that fathomless gaze, carrying gratitude, farewell, and something older than either of them. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to step forward, to reach out, but she knew the moment was not hers to claim. He gave a final, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and moved into the labyrinth of trees. His dark form merged with the trunks until he was only part of the forest again, eternal and unseen. The silence that followed was not emptiness but fullness, a resonance that settled into her bones. She walked home through the crystalline morning, every footfall echoing with a memory of his presence. Back in her cabin, the fire burned low. She removed her locket from beneath her collar, its hinge worn smooth by years of use. From her pocket she drew a single strand of black hair she had found on the moss days earlier, thick and coarse, still faintly scented of rain. She placed it inside the locket and closed it with a soft click. The weight of it against her heart felt like a vow. That passion of spirit, that fierce loyalty, does not wither with age. Outside, the forest stretched endless and unknowable, but within her a quiet flame burned steady, a reminder that she had been seen, and in that seeing had discovered the boundless strength of devotion.